Welcome to our presentation on our study of neuroticism and how it relates to sleep quality in first-year university students. My name is Maya Wood. You will later be hearing from my co-authors Eli Bloom and Jacob Graves-Linnen. To begin, we concerned ourselves with two questions in particular. The first, whether or not a correlation exists between the innate trait neuroticism and subjective reported sleep quality. The second, whether a correlation between the familiarity of a sleeping location and subjective sleep quality exists. As seen on the examples on this slide, previous research has shown that neuroticism is capable of affecting sleep quality through a myriad of factors. For example, increased rumination in the daytime leads to higher cognitive pre-sleep arousal, which inhibits the ability to fall asleep and stay asleep. Less time spent in the restorative REM stage, REM stands for rapid eye movement, stage of the sleep cycle, leads to waking up less refreshed and more fatigued. Interestingly, there is also a self-contained effect depicted here, where an individual reports sleep issues, also presents with comorbidities which may or may not be directly related to the sleep. This leads to increased worry in the individual about sleep, their health, and its effects, which only serves to increase neurotic levels and tendencies and aggravate their sleep problems further. To address our research questions, we designed a short 5-question survey. 2 questions addressed neurotic tendencies, and their scores were then later combined. Further, 2 questions asked about average hours slept a night in the last week, and how many times their sleep was interrupted a night on average in the last week. The last question asked whether or not participants currently slept in their childhood home. We hypothesized that the neuroticism scores and the participants' subjective sleep quality parameters would be negatively correlated, and that participants currently sleeping in their childhood homes would report sleeping more hours a night on average in a week, as well as fewer interruptions than their counterparts who did not.
Thanks, Maya. To examine the relationship between neuroticism and overall sleep quality, survey participants indicated their tendency towards neuroticism through survey questions. They also indicated the average amount of hours they slept in a night and the average amount of nightly sleep interruptions they experienced over 1 week. Within this first graph, there is a negative correlation regarding the neuroticism and the number of hours the participants would sleep per night, which supports our hypothesis. The y-axis measures the total hours of sleep per night on average, and the x-axis measures the total combined neuroticism scores. This graph helps us understand that neuroticism causes people to not sleep as well both in quantity and quality of sleep. This is further validated with our next slide. Our second graph is showing the positive correlation between the total combined scores of neuroticism and the amount of nightly sleep interruptions. Just like the first graph, the x-axis is measuring the same neuroticism scores, but the y-axis is measuring the amount of times woken up per night. Research has suggested that strong neurotic personality tendencies are linked to less time spent in the REM stage of the sleep cycle. A shortened REM stage proposes that the overall nightly sleep cycle becomes shorter as a result and more vulnerable to the untimely interruptions. There is supporting data that poor objective sleep is linked to higher neuroticism scores. Basically, because people are more anxious, they are waking up more. And research shows because they're waking up more, they're more anxious, which causes the problem to be even greater. As you will hear today in our presentation, many of the research studies we have found support the hypothesis that higher level of anxiety and worry, neuroticism, increase the number of times a person would wake up throughout the night. Our research and this graph are limited, although still show, in most instances, support for our hypothesis. We believe if we had a bigger sample pool, our data would show an even greater increase. Within our third graph, we continue to focus on sleep quality and quantity of our participants, but look at it from another angle. Instead of focusing on neuroticism, in this case, we focused on familiar sleeping environments. The COVID pandemic has given us an unusual opportunity to survey students who were still at home or had returned to their childhood home. We hypothesized, albeit incorrectly, that familiarity would have a positive correlation with sleep quantity and quality. Our limited study showed students living in a familiar environment actually slept fewer hours. They did, however, report that they woke up more infrequently. First year university students sleeping in their childhood homes may have a more established routine and tolerance to potential external sleep interrupters through prolonged exposure. Like any study that gets results from self reporting, these numbers could be slightly skewed.
As I'm sure you all know from experience, consistent, uninterrupted sleep is key to a healthy body and mind. Based on our findings, as well as previous studies, people with higher neuroticism scores report fewer hours of sleep a night as well as more nightly interruptions. Previous studies have shown neuroticism to be linked with elevated pre-sleep arousal levels as well as early arousal levels. This higher arousal may make it harder to fall asleep and fall back asleep after a wake. We decided to choose the childhood home as a familiar location because that seemed the most universal place in a class of diverse age ranges and backgrounds. Unexpectedly, a familiar sleeping location did not show a difference in sleep duration, but did show lower interrupted sleep instances. Sleep duration, sleep quality, and insomnia have all been linked to general worry. For college students, both our research and other studies suggest an increased association between insomnia and perceived academic stress. Worry and stress, even subconsciously, will have a negative impact on the quality of sleep. For future studies, it would be interesting to explore the relationship of the other 4 personality traits of the Ocean model: extroversion, openness, conscientiousness, and agreeableness. This could provide more information on personality traits as predictors of sleep. A greatly increased scale would also be essential for future studies. Research on the influence of innate personality traits, such as neuroticism and worry, can help provide useful information to supporting staff, such as counselors, student life coordinators, residence assistants, and medical staff. Specifically, research showing the correlation between high stress and poor sleep quality could help institute increased psychological support, programming, awareness, and education.